A major symbol of Buddhism is the lotus flower. And the reason is that lotus flowers grow in muddy, dirty water, and they come up secretly or invisibly from the underneath. Let's say, picture a dirty lake with lots of mud in the water and a muddy bottom, and the lotus grows from underwater, and suddenly it appears and opens clean and fresh. So what that represents is that wisdom is not a way to avoid the world, but a way to experience the world as a wonderful, beautiful place full of vitality and opportunity and peace. So an old friend used to use a different analogy, the swamp. If you're not willing to understand the swamp and go through the swamp, you can't get to the other side. The swamp is full of life and meaning. So all the complexities of life, as well as all the good things of life, are all part of a bigger picture. And the lotus flower coming up through the mud and being pure is symbolic of our mind being pure, even if we're surrounded by difficult things in life. So that's why I love this picture. It's nice colors, right? To me, it's very full of energy and inviting. So everyone said they're not interested in the history of Buddhism. So I will go through those slides very quickly and won't read everything. Basically, Buddhism started 2,500 years ago. There was a family, which many myths say they were royalty of a small kingdom, but actually research shows they were probably upper middle class working people. The father was a leader in the government. Gautama's father was a civil servant with a good position, so they were very comfortable. But whatever that story is, he suddenly realized that life is difficult when he went outside, and the stories that he saw a sick person, a dying person, and a corpse. And those three sights made him suddenly realize that life is precarious. A life of pleasure and comforts and indulgence always ends in disappointment later, whether it's while you're alive or ends in death or you lose people you love. So how do you understand life in a better way and avoid the suffering? So the last sight that Buddha saw, the future Buddha saw, was a monk or an ascetic living a very minimal life and studying wisdom. And he decided that's what he was going to do. But he wasn't interested in anything theoretical. He wanted to understand life and how to find the real meaning of life and make life better. And he meditated, he studied hard, he lived minimally, and then he started starving himself to weaken the body. That was a belief system back then. And finally, he was nearly collapsing, and he said, "This is just going to end in my death." So he was a very practical person. He said, "Enough of this. This doesn't work." And then he remembered, and this is a great story. He remembered a time when he was a young teenager, sitting in the field watching his father at work, and feeling an immense kind of bliss came over him. And he entered a state of mind that felt blissful. And he then remembered that as he had gone through 6 years of striving and torturing himself to weaken the body. And then he said, maybe this is a better path. I'm going to explore that inner quality that's there all the time. We all have this ability as human beings to find that peace and bliss inside of ourselves. I think in Christianity, it's called grace. That's one way to describe it. It's this, without creating anything, it comes from deep inside. And it's from a higher level or from the higher power, as the AA movement calls it. But somehow we have this innate ability to find our own inner peace. And Buddha sat all night, and when the morning star showed, he finally was able to drop all the suffering of life and find meaning and clarity. And he spent the rest of his life teaching. Actually, it's stated in many places that he almost decided, well, now I can die. I don't need to do anything. I'm happy. I've achieved my life's goal. But finally, he said to himself, I can't just leave the earth, the people of this planet, without this knowledge. And he decided to spend his life teaching so other people could experience what he experienced. But it's interesting that, sometimes people say Buddha was perfect, he knew everything. There's a lot of stories that he didn't. He was at peace, but that doesn't mean you know everything. One of the stories, and this is interesting for women, he didn't want any women to be part of the Buddhist studies and not to be part of what they call the Sangha, the community. It was only supposed to be for men because it would distract the men if there were women. But his cousin Ananda convinced him that women also deserved that opportunity. So, even if you're very wise, there's room for learning and experience. And, in those days, it was very male-centered society. So, as they say with many people, he was to some degree a product of his time, but he certainly innovated many things that changed the beliefs of that time. All right. So that's the history. Any questions or comment? You can unmute
I have
yourself.
a question, if you
Yes.
don't mind. I know most of us said we weren't super interested in the history, but that's not my main interest, but I am kind of interested. And I probably should know this, and you might have mentioned it, but what is the time period we're talking about here?
Okay. 500 BC,
Okay.
around
Okay.
that.
Okay. And then when he decided to, not eat and go fasting, was he pulling that from some of the beliefs of the time, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm not a scholar of Buddhist history. However, it's a good question, because many people do that today. They think they have to, undergo some kind of torture or extreme deprivation in order to free their mind from materialism or, you know, uh, indulgence, it's overindulgence. But the first thing that Buddha taught after his enlightenment, he went back to 5 people he had been with. They were all kind of starving themselves and trying to find wisdom by weakening the body. And he went to them and said, uh, this is not the way. The way is the middle way. The middle way is not to overindulge, nor to torture yourself or starve yourself, because both of those are ignoring the meaning of life. Our life is so important and precious and has so much potential that to focus on whether we're eating or wearing a hair shirt, which was I think Christian sects would wear something that would be very uncomfortable just so you'd feel no rest, no peace at all, to be more spiritual. All those things of torture or overindulgence are a misuse of our capacity as human beings. So why focus on them? It's like if you have an eating disorder, the best thing is to learn not to think about eating at all. We have better things to think about. And when we can think about the things that are inspiring and beautiful and important, we don't need to worry about either starving or overindulging. We can live in a balanced way, and that's called the middle way. All right. So I gave you a little more information than what you asked for, but it's good. The middle way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The middle way is also there's more to it. It's not just saying, oh, don't indulge or starve. It's actually, in Buddhism, we drop the dualities. We drop the opposites. There's not good and bad. There's not right and wrong, but there are things that lead to more suffering and things that lead to less suffering. And in a compassionate mind, we're not labeling things by either good or bad, right and wrong. With a compassionate mind, which is the mind that allows peace, we can see this person is creating more pain for themselves and for others, or they're doing things that are wise and are going to help them in the future. So it's a different way of seeing people's actions and their character. Just to be clear, there is no God, and Buddha was not God either. There's no external God in Buddhism. Some people say it's not a religion, but in my opinion, a religion is anything which helps understand how to live better. What's the meaning of your life? So to me, it's still a religion. And also, Buddha was an ordinary human being. He was born gifted, but he also is very clear that we're all capable of reaching the same thing he did. We're all capable of that. If we understand the principles and practice them, we will get more and more clarity, more peace, and find the same peace that he found. And another point is that we are already Buddha. We already have that in us. We have that wisdom, but it's clouded over. A simple analogy is the sun is always shining. It doesn't stop. But when there are heavy clouds, we don't even see the sun. We might even doubt whether it's there. But the sun is always there in us. So through our practices, we can help the clouds disperse until there's just a few little white puffs of cloud and the sun is shining. So that's what we want, right? Yeah. I've given this talk a few times, and I decided to add in, to make this real, a little actual meditation. So you're welcome to turn off the camera if you don't want anyone to be looking at you, but sit there with your eyes half, if you would, with your eyes half open and looking down, so you're not focusing on anything, and try to sit upright in your chair. And we'll take 3 minutes. I'll set a timer. And as I said, you could turn off the camera if you prefer. Let me set the timer. Okay, so just, oh, that's 3 seconds. No good. Okay. All right, so feel your breathing. Sit comfortably. I recommend keeping the eyes open. In Buddhist meditation, usually the eyes are open, but half open, not focusing on anything particular, and looking downwards. Feel your breath coming in and out, and observe your mind. And in 3 minutes, we'll ring the bell. Okay. So, does anyone want to share what those 3 minutes felt like? There's no wrong answer. That's Jocelyn.
I can share. Well, I have a fan in this room that makes a lot of noise, so I was distracted a lot by that. But I focused on just below me, which you told me to do, and it was nice. It was peaceful
Mhm.
despite the noise.
Okay, sure. If you might find if you did that a bit longer, 5 or 10 minutes, then the noise
Mhm.
would stop it distracting you. Sometimes it takes a while for the mind to settle down and, look inside. Basically, what we're doing is turning our light of awareness inside, and that
Mhm.
opens up the dark rooms that we normally don't have time or focus to be aware of. So that's the benefit of that kind of meditation. We don't have anything distracting us. Um,
Yeah.
you know, someone's coming in. Yeah, anyone else want to share? Any, yeah, sure, Em.
I was having a lot of thoughts about a lot of stressors in my everyday life. I had to keep kind of drawing back to my breath. And it felt almost um, really hard to focus on the breath. So I was trying to do a little bit of metered breathing, and it made me start to get drowsy. I think it's just because I've been listening to nighttime meditations to help me sleep for so long that maybe I'm just struggling to do them during the daytime as well.
Uh,
Um, it is
so
also a little early, and maybe I didn't get enough sleep last night, so that could have been part of it.
it's a little bit what? I didn't hear that. A
Oh,
little,
I said it's also pretty early in the day, and I
oh,
might not have gotten enough sleep last night, so that might
oh,
have to do with it as well.
well, excuse me. One thing is that with meditation, and this is universal, you'll go through various experiences. Sometimes you feel, I could do this forever. I feel great. And then suddenly, a couple of minutes later, you either get very distracted or you might start thinking, oh, look what happened in the past. Look what I did wrong. You have regrets, and you can go into that for a while. And then you come back to, oh, now I feel peaceful. So your mind can really create a lot of entertainment,
Mhm.
so to speak. And don't take any of it too seriously. Observe it and feel it. And as you do that, it's like ripening your inner awareness and the sensitivity to what's real. Eventually, there'll be less of that. And also, like I said, if you wanted to try longer, if you haven't done this, let's say for 10 or 15 minutes, you could try. This is not a guided meditation. I think you've been doing, and you were doing some with guided meditations, like a
Yes.
voice or music. Yeah. So that these are all different things. They're all good. I've been a practitioner of plain like no external stimulation, but it's good also if you have a nice voice and it helps you settle down. So you could try both. All right. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it. Yes, Susan.
Yeah, I noticed I've been trying to practice doing some meditation for short amounts of time, like 3 to 5 minutes, every day or sometime like that. And I've noticed that normally I will do this with my eyes closed. So I tried it, looking down like you had, mentioned. And I'm just curious. I feel like it worked better actually having my eyes open, which I is
Hmm.
different than what I would have thought. I feel like when my eyes have been closed, I've been more distracted with my own thoughts, and having to focus back onto my breathing. But this time, I mean, I did get distracted a few times, but um,
Mhm.
it was a different experience with having my eyes open. And I'm just curious, what is the reason maybe that that Buddhists tend to have their eyes open? Is there a particular reason?
Yes. There's a reason for almost everything that's done in Buddhism. It's a very detailed teaching. So the reason is that we're not separating from the world. We're neither immersed in it, and we're not carried away with it, but we're also not withdrawing from the world. So by having the eyes open and looking down tends to tell your brain it's okay to let go. I guess through evolution, when you're looking straight ahead, it's like you're walking through the forest or hunting for an animal, or you have to look where you're going. If you're looking down, it's more like you're sitting still and peacefully. But you don't, if you close your eyes, then your brain starts to drift off and it's not connecting. So it's that middle ground again. The middle way is a very natural human way of being, neither disconnecting nor staying overly connected to the external world. Eventually, the ideal is as you get deeper and deeper with meditation practices, then even during the day when you're walking around, you can stay in this peaceful mindset and see deeper into everyday activities and see other people with more compassion and kindness. And but the seated practice is a good starting point to develop that ability for oneself. All right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good question. Yeah, thank you. Steph.
Yeah, sorry, I had to go let my dog out or bring her in for a minute. So I had to
Sure.
leave, but I kind of heard what you all were saying. So kind of some similar things. I typically use like the Calm app. If you're familiar with that, like for my like morning meditation, and I've been doing that for a while now, pretty regularly, you know. I don't probably make it every day, but I try, and it really does help me. But I do kind of like to have that voice, you know, the guided voice kind of keeping me on track a little bit, because I found like I could do that for 10 or 15 minutes.
Yes.
And usually not get distracted. Sometimes I do. But with this, like the 3 minutes, although I did feel calm, and it did help. It felt like a lot longer than 3 minutes, if that makes sense. You know?
Yeah. Well, that's natural, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
didn't have anything to kind of fill your thoughts or, yeah, like, a voice or music does that.
Yeah.
I personally, I would say if you want to try it at some point, you could alternate doing with or without, because eventually you would also settle down. It might take 5 minutes or 10 minutes that your mind starts to let go and feel comfortable, even without any external stimulation. So it could be worth a try. All right. Yeah, that's the guided meditation is good. I've heard of Calm. I've never tried it, but it has a good reputation. So it's still good, but you might be stronger than you realize. And even without that support, you could probably do a lot for yourself as well.
It is amazing how much it helps. I feel like it just really slows you. Sorry, there's my dog, everyone. It really does kind of, people who have never tried meditation, I'm still very new to it. But like my sister, for example, I think, oh my goodness, if she would just meditate even like a couple times a week, it'd be so good for her, because she's always just like going on the go. And I am like that too, by nature, but it does help me just kind of be more peaceful and take a minute and slow down. So
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it helps you. I just started seeing there's a lot of messages in the chat. It felt calming, Steph. Thank you for writing it here. Sometimes we're distracted. Lisa wrote that today she couldn't focus today, but other days you will be able to. And especially early in the morning is a good time to do this, before all the activities of the day, before you start interacting with other people. I mean, that's not the only time, but it's a good way. If you get up a little earlier, you can set that time up for yourself. That's one thing that works. And the other time that's usually very good is before going to sleep. So, and okay, we're going to do a little more meditation later, Lara. Lara wrote that she got cut out and had to rejoin. All right, so let's continue on and we'll have some more discussion. I wanted to share that, you know, these are universal human truths. Buddhism is, there's a saying in Buddhism, to study Buddhism is to study the self. And to study the self is to forget the self. And there's more to it than that, but I'll stop there. But what does that mean? We're not talking about something mysterious. We're supposed to understand this teaching, not make it a mystery that we have to believe in because someone said it's true. It's supposed to be our own experience. And people throughout recorded history have understood these principles. William Blake was a natural mystic. He never heard of Buddhism, or he never studied it, but he wrote about how to see the world with when the senses open up to the full reality that's around us. You know, he's posing this question to the readers of his poetry. How do you know that a bird is not a world of delight that you're just shutting yourself off from? So when we clarify our minds, we can see the amazing beauty of everything around us. You know, after I meditate, especially after I meditate, I sometimes walk outside and everything is full of delight, every little moving thing, and they touch the heart. It's hard to explain, but the more we clear our own mind up, the more we see that we live in the world of wisdom. And Plato talked about what's real and what's an image. Even the Matrix, the movie, what do you think they were talking about? Living in a shadow world versus the real world. There's a famous story he used about a cave, that's Plato, where people were chained in a cave and they only saw shadows and they thought that was the real world. And once they go outside, they realize that everything was a fake shadow of what's real. And Dogen, the Zen teacher from the 13th century, said, don't wait, don't look around. Where's enlightenment? Where is it? It's right here. Every day, everything we're doing, eating rice and drinking tea, is the great enlightenment when we see it fully. It can take some effort to get there, but it's right around us all the time. One second, someone's coming in. You know, even I'm going to make it another analogy. How many people here have seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart? Yes. So I can't see everyone, but I'll tell you, at the end of the movie, he goes through all kinds of struggles to feel his value. At the end of the movie, when he realizes he got rescued from almost killing himself, and he's so happy that he's about to be arrested, and he just says, I'm going to jail. I'm going to jail. So that inner, it's not just peace, it's connection to life is stronger than any circumstances that we're in. And this is well known throughout history. I think Buddhism is different in that it gives a very carefully explained approach how to get there. It's a very well worked out understanding of what our human nature is and how to find an end to suffering. And now we'll get to the main principles. Any other question? Maybe one question if someone has, someone who hasn't spoken, perhaps? Anything you want to bring up?
I'm sorry I joined late. I'm
Hi,
getting
Jacqueline.
stitches at the moment. Hi.
Oh, you got stitches?
Yes,
I hope you're okay.
I'm in the process of getting them right now.
Oh my gosh.
So
You're dedicated,
helping
aren't
me
you?
be distracted. You're helping with distraction. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I hope it goes well. It should. All right. So these are some of the main principles that I want to go through. Middle way we talked about a little bit. Oops. His very first talk, and again, Buddhism is very practical, and Buddha himself was very practical. There's many examples. The reason he talked about the middle way as his first teaching was because his first followers were the five comrades of his who were all starving themselves. And at first they wanted to reject him. When he came over, they knew he'd started eating food. And they said, oh, he's given up. He's no good anymore. But he was so sincere and inspiring. When they met him, they couldn't resist his message. And he told them, look, I found the right way to practice and to find wisdom is not to starve yourself, nor to indulge yourself, but to find the middle way, because anything else is belittling our human nature and our potential. So he explained that to these five followers in a very practical way, and they started following his approach. We also, in Buddhism, don't believe that there's immortal life, like a permanent soul, nor does life end. When your body dies, life doesn't just end and that's it. So, what's the third way, if other than those two? Well, it's a little more subtle, having to do with, due to our obsession with the material world and our senses, we don't see that we create changes in the world. We have energy that continues after death and before we're born. We're carrying on life endlessly. So it's called rebirth rather than reincarnation. And rebirth is happening all the time. I'm not the same person I was yesterday, even though there's many similarities. And each of us is different. Moment to moment, we're changing. And day after day and year after year, we change. So there is no permanent self. That's one of the teachings of Buddhism. There is no permanent self to be reborn, reincarnated over and over. That was the belief of Hinduism at the time. So reincarnation is a permanent soul that gets reborn over and over, while in Buddhism, our energies and our karma and our wisdom and so on, those follow on over time without limit. So it's neither of those extremes. Again, a middle way. And this is important. If you want to understand how to avoid the suffering, is to see that we're not limited by physical life, and yet our physical life is still very important. What we do with it creates our future, both in this life and probably after this life. That's a lot to absorb. It can take many years to kind of work on that and try to shift awareness away from the physical body is what's right in front of us, what we feel with our senses. And yet we all know there's something more than that, don't we? What is love, for example? Is that based on the senses, or is that coming from a deeper place? So there's a lot to that other place that's beyond what our senses perceive. Buddhism is non-dualistic, so it doesn't cling to any beliefs, but to our freedom, our true freedom. When we're freed of attachments to anything, we're freed of repulsions from anything. No greed, no anger. I want this, I don't want that. When we can let go of all that, we can find grace and peace and wisdom. The Four Noble Truths were also an early teaching. How many of you have heard of the Four Noble Truths? Okay, good. Yeah. I have them summarized here. This is considered a very core teaching in Buddhism. Again, suffering is what we live with. Whenever you get very sick, you realize how easy it is to forget what pain is like. But when we're in pain, we realize this is a big issue. Like, how do you solve that? whether it's emotionally or physically, this pain is something that is worth paying attention to. So the Four Noble Truths are about the truth of suffering. Look at the list there. Birth is painful. It's painful because we're going to live through all these other things: illness, aging, death, separation from what we love, and being forced to be close to things we hate or we don't want. So all of those things cause pain because of our attachments and our preconceptions. So the cause of suffering is craving and discrimination. I need this, I want that. But it's easy to say, well, I won't do that anymore. However, it comes from a place we don't fully control. So we need a path to give up craving and discrimination. We need a path so that our mind can open up to another way of functioning. And that's called the Noble Eightfold Path. It's a way of living differently. So we're no longer stuck with the painful attachment to the senses, to pleasure, to avoiding things, and blindness. Ignorance or blindness means we just can't see. Who here has ever done something they regretted later? See, okay, it's probably unanimous. Well, that's considered ignorance or blindness. It's not meant as an insult like ignorance, but it means we can't see fully what we're doing at that time. And that kind of blindness or ignorance causes suffering later because we have regrets naturally. So we want to end that cycle of doing and being blind or being attached or avoiding. Every time we act on that, we have pain later, trying to undo that. So we want to end that cycle of suffering. And that's what the Eightfold Path is about. And again, like India, I'll quickly on an aside say this: Buddhism originated in India, northern India, and then Zen developed in China. The Chinese, for whatever reason, I don't know their cultures that well, but India, they have lists of everything. There are 100 lists. There's 10 precepts, 5 precepts, 3 poisons, 3 jewels, Eightfold Path, 4. Okay, they're all good, but they really go into great detail. So if you look at that part of Buddhism, it's extremely well explained and detailed. It's very rational, and yet it's very connected to important aspects of life. The Eightfold Path distinguishes these 8 aspects, and I'm not going to go into each of them, but there are subtle differences between right thought and right understanding, for example. There are differences, but those come under the idea of wisdom. We have to have the right ideas so that we can set our direction. Like if you're in a boat and you need to sail, you need to know where north is so you can set your direction. That's kind of the right understanding, the right thought. I'm going to go north. Now, forgetting about the boat, we also have to be ethical. Self-help movements often leave out ethics. Like they say, be here now. How do I do that? It's not enough to say, be here now. It's not enough to say, love is all you need. There's more to it. We need to live in harmony with what's real. What's real is to be ethical, to be kind, compassionate, to have the right understanding of what's important, and to set your goals using that understanding. So ethics and morality, right speech, right action, and right livelihood, those are an important part of growing in wisdom. Because if we're building nuclear bombs, we might have a question about that and question whether we're doing the right thing. So I like to think of work as either positive or neutral. And even before I knew about Buddhism, I said, I want to do something that's either positive or at worst neutral. So, try to avoid things like selling weapons or poisons or alcohol. By the way, alcohol, read the articles, the latest research, not so good. But I'm not going to get into that. And the third part is mindfulness. And this is where the self-help world focuses a lot. be here now, concentrate, be in the moment. Without the other two parts, it's very crippling and you can't quite do it. Unless you're already a very ethical, wise person, and then you might be able to use this, seeing what's here in the moment. You know, when you practice ethics and morality, you're able to see other people more clearly because you're not busy, numbing yourself, let's say. So we need all those three things to work together in order to approach wisdom, the bigger idea of wisdom. Does that make sense? Any question about that? I hope I'm explaining it well enough. Yeah. Yes, Steph.
Yeah, how did you know I wanted to say something? um, so I think like you're right. Like mindfulness, I mean, obviously is a very good thing, but I think sometimes a lot of, like you said, self-help books, or even I practice yoga, so even within that realm, they take it out, just that little part, like you said, be here now. I hear that all the time when I go to yoga classes, which is great, but then you also, if you don't have anything, I don't know, almost like a foundation to build that on, well, it's like, well, how do I do that? What do you mean, be here now?
Sure.
Kind of.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Right. I think it can help, as you said, it can help somewhat. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to be here now. I'll stop the worrying. Thank you for reminding me. I'm just going to be here, do the yoga, feel the breath. But eventually you need more. You have to, examine more aspects of life and have a continuous practice so that you can deepen that and really let go of worries and not worry. Yeah, good. Yeah, Susan.
Yeah, I just have a question. This is the first time I've heard of the Noble Eightfold Path, and this seems like this is very helpful. Is there anything you would recommend to learn more about this, like whether it's a book or something of that sort?
Sure. Two books I recommend are Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and one that's more detailed and goes through things. Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind is a great experiential description by a teacher who was in California at the time. But the other book I recommend is Opening the Hand of Thought. I forget who the author is, but that's a good description of why we practice in Buddhism and what it means, etc.
Thank you very much.
Sure. So these are the main. This is the path laid out by Buddha himself. And there's a lot you can even find things online, but some of them are better than others. So a good book is helpful. And each of these things has a lot more description behind them, but I think you've got the overall idea. And this division into three sections is commonly understood also. So it's wisdom, ethical behavior, and mental practice. Even in psychotherapy, Donald Winnicott, famous psychologist of the 20th century, he said that when our intellect and our emotions both come to an understanding at the same time together, that's when we really change. They have to work together because if you're emotional and it's not based on reality, it won't work or won't last. Similarly, if we're just intellectual, we're not able to have an impact or the right feeling in life. These things have to work together. I have to let somebody in. Okay, good. So let's continue on. And I think this is the last of the main concepts, the three treasures. And I forget, it was Susan or Jocelyn said, practicing by oneself can be difficult. So the three treasures recognize as having a teacher. Buddha is one, but there are many very good teachers. Some more powerful, more aware than others, but there's a lot of wisdom out there. And then there's the truth itself, the Dharma, which is about life and human nature. And the third is to have a community of people who have similar values, trying to find truth. So that's called the Sangha. So these are the three treasures. If you want the most support in your practice, it's good to have a teacher, study the Dharma, whether it's reading or meditating, and to have a community where you can share and support each other. That's the ideal, if you can do those things. If you are missing one of those or two of those, you can still practice, but it's good to have all of those if you can. Any question? Anyone who hasn't spoken or who wants to say something? Okay, that's fine. Good. Okay. Jacqueline, I think you had missed the was it you? No, I think Lara said she had lost connection and came back. So now you can meditate. I'm not sure if she's here though. I think she's having trouble with her phone connection, Lara. All right, we're going to meditate another 3 minutes. And I'll set the timer. So if you want to turn off your camera, you can, but we're all friendly people here. Okay. You can observe your mind. Try to follow the breathing. It's okay if you wander away from the breathing. It's okay. You can come back to it. This is your time. Okay. Welcome back. Now, does anyone want to share who didn't yet? Maybe Jacqueline, are you through your stitches? Maybe you can't unmute from where you are, but anyway, if someone I'm just trying to invite more people to share their experiences. Okay, anyone else one person want to say anything that, okay, yes, what would you like to share?
It was a little easier that time around for me.
Hmm.
But
Nodding. Several people agreed with you, by the way. Okay, a few.
yeah, I think I did better this time. Just I think I was fighting, my eyes too much last time because I'm like trying not to look at anything in particular or else my brain's gonna process that it's there. So I closed my eyes and I focused on continuing to bring my attention back to just my breath. And just having only that as my stimuli coming into my body made it a little easier to calm my thoughts.
Okay.
And I know that it might be a question of or not question, it might just be a thing of practicing. But I feel much more centered for sure.
Okay, good. Yeah, you can experiment with different approaches. Just give them each a try, meaningful try and see what it's like. There are actually different schools of Buddhism which have some different practices. The ones I'm familiar with are Mahayana, which is the eyes are open. I think in South Asia they might close the eyes, but I believe, from my experience also, and even with Tai Chi, which I've been doing for a very long time and teaching it, we look inside, it's a skill, it's an important skill. When you're moving and doing martial arts, you should be aware of yourself too. Otherwise, you'll be
Definitely.
tense. You have
Yeah,
to
that's something I
feel.
really want to work on is walking meditation.
Yeah, good. That's a good practice too. So being able to live in the world and be active and also be aware of what's going on in you is important too. All right, good. I'm glad you shared that. And you did have some people nodding in agreement that it was better for them this time. Just sitting here and discussing this. Oh, look at that. How did that get in the slides? I borrowed this idea from Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, because in the book, you turn a page and suddenly you have this blank. I think it's my own, I got my own image. I didn't borrow the image from the book, but when your mind is very centered, it's like just that, and it's full of life. Oh, by the way, I just saw these comments. TH said, I love Blake. So William Blake, he talked a lot about seeing what's there in the moment. He was a natural. And I have a talk I'm going to give again, probably in the fall, on William Blake as the artist and poet and human potential. It's Terry, you have to be sure to be there. Terry, I think you're TH, right? And Steph likes It's a Wonderful Life. The first time I saw A Wonderful Life and I was a teenager, I thought it was kind of a boring movie. And I've probably seen it 5 times. And each time as I've gotten older, I've appreciated it a lot more until I see how it's very meaningful story.
I watch it every Christmas. It was like a family tradition, and I just keep doing it. Like when we were little, we all watched it. My mom really loved old movies and stuff, and then I just keep doing it. It's literally, I think it probably means a lot more to me now than it did, when I was a kid.
Sure, right. Kids don't understand those things. They might have an idea about it, but living life and some of the things we face, same things in the movie, it touches home. So what is Zen and Buddhism? How do those relate? Zen developed in China, and it started to emphasize immediate impact, like fewer words, less focus on doctrine. And as I said here, it doesn't mean doctrine is bad, but they took a different approach to connecting. Let's say a teacher wants to connect to their student. They might do something very unusual. Someone's asked a teacher, I've forgotten myself completely. I'm free. Is there still a sin in my mind? And the teacher said, Mount Sumeru. Now, Mount Sumeru is a mountain in Japan. But why did he say that? He didn't explain that. But at that moment, that student was ready for a shift. We don't know exactly what was going on at that moment, but it's called living words. When words have impact, and instead of talking, there can be silence, words, maybe ideas that make sense, or ideas that don't seem so logical. So Zen is more, what's the sound of one hand? What is the sound of one hand? Anyone know? Sometimes they say, what's the sound of one hand clapping? But what is the sound of one hand? It's right here. John Cage was a 20th century musician who studied some Zen, and he wrote a piece called 4 minutes, 33 seconds. And the performer comes out on the stage. The original performance was a piano, and he opened the music. And at the beginning of the piece, he closed the keyboard and sat there and did nothing. And then after another minute or so, he turned a page. And he did that for 4 minutes, 33 seconds with no sound. And that was the influence of Zen. So what did that mean? It meant the audience now becomes aware of their expectations rather than them being, all of us have some expectation. What's happening next? What's going to happen? To be aware of that means we can see our open mind before those expectations. So that music was there to make people aware what they're expecting and what's actually around them. How those two things are not necessarily the same. So that's the sound of one hand, maybe, or sound of two hands doing nothing. We don't need to say Zen or Buddha in order to embody Buddhism. If we're kind to other people at work, if they're rushing and we're calm natured and we say, how's your day going? That's also Buddhism. Compassion, caring about other people in the way that's appropriate at the moment, that is helpful. That's wisdom also. It doesn't have to be, you look tense, you should meditate. That may not be the way to approach it. I remember working years ago, I would come into the office. I used to work elsewhere in a bank, and this young woman, maybe 35, she would always say, if I said good morning, she'd say, great morning, God bless you. Have you prayed to God, or something like that? Every time I met her. So I don't remember how I handled it, but it seemed excessive, right? So, just saying good morning would have been enough. Same for us. We don't want to preach. One of the Zen masters said, it was the sixth patriarch. He said, if someone doesn't agree with you or is not interested, just make them happy. They don't have to believe what we believe, what I believe, what you believe. Make them happy, whatever that means. Yeah. And that's deep, really, because we're not there to convince people up here that they have the wrong ideas, but how to connect and make life better. That's what it's about. As I said, I do 𝗙cie𝗂𝗿, I teach that, and seated meditation is a good start for getting to know yourself better. It's not always comfortable. You know, the feeling I have sometimes, I just got back from being at the Zen Mountain Monastery upstate, and at times I've sat a session, which is days of seated meditation with a meal here and there, mostly sitting though. And it feels like you're breaking through a brick wall sometimes. So it's not very pleasant at times, but after doing that for a couple of days, some new dimensions open up that you weren't aware of. And it takes that kind of concentrated effort sometimes to open up a new awareness or new dimension of perception. So if you sit every day for 10 minutes or 5 or 15, you can start to open up new awareness. Let's see, it's 10 after 12. I want to stop here. I have a few stories to share, but we can also talk. Anyone want to bring up a question, comment, topic, any topic? It's okay if you don't. Jocelyn, yes.
I wanted to know if it's normal for the eyes to cross when you are meditating.
You mean, should you try to make them cross?
No, they naturally did the second time around.
I don't know. I haven't run into that, so yeah, I guess it's not really common. Was it was it uncomfortable?
No, it was
Oh.
very comfortable.
All right, then you can probably let it go as long as it's not causing you any trouble. It might be a temporary, there's a lot of temporary states with meditation you go through, so that might be one of them.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. As long as it's not, you know, if your eyes start to, you know, have a problem, then stop and reconsider.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Sure. So this story is relatively well known, but you know, that's among people who've read some of the Zen books. A professor who is a professor of religion, a Zen professor of religion at a good university in Japan, went to visit a Zen master. He was probably picturing, oh, mano a mano, let's talk this out, you know, let's see what the Zen master knows. So he goes in there and they sit down, and the Zen master said, let's have some tea. So they sit down, now the tea's ready, and the Zen teacher, the master, you know, not the professor, he starts pouring the tea, and he keeps pouring it, and the cup starts overflowing, and the water's on the table, and the professor has to back away to avoid the hot water. And he yells, like, what are you doing? It's full, nothing else will go in there. And then the master says, that's the same with your mind. How can you learn anything when you're so full of your ideas? Now, that could be insulting to someone, maybe a stranger who doesn't have any background. But if maybe this Zen master looked at the professor and said, he knows something. He needs a little pizzazz. He needs a little push here. How can you learn more when your mind is full of your own ideas? So he only said that because he knew that the recipient could absorb it and would take it in a positive way to reconsider and to learn something. So that's the attunement to the moment. This story is a two-parter, 2 pages here. This is another true story. You know, the things from 2,500 years ago, you can imagine they get a bit mythologized, but this one is much more literal, was recorded. It's only from about 500 years ago. So this hunter was going around shooting deer with his bow and arrow, and the Zen teachers don't believe in killing animals in general. That's a whole other discussion, but the hunter passed by the monastery, and the teacher came out and saw that there was some potential in this hunter. There was something he saw. So the hunter asked him, "Did you see some deer pass by?" And the master says, "Who are you?" "I'm a hunter." And then the teacher says, "Do you know how to shoot an arrow?" The hunter says, "Of course, yeah, I do." "How many deer can you shoot with one arrow?" Now, what's he talking about? One deer with one arrow. And the teacher says, "Then you don't understand how to shoot." So the hunter asks him. Now he's getting a little confused, and he's stopping his usual thinking process. "Do you know how to shoot?" And the teacher says, "Yes, certainly." "How many can you shoot with one arrow?" And the teacher says, "I can shoot the entire herd with one arrow." The hunter gets a little remorseful. Why would you kill all these deer? So the teacher finally says, "If you're so smart, why can't you shoot yourself?" And the students, now he becomes a student. He says, "I don't know how to shoot myself." And basically, the hunter was waking up to pursuing wisdom and self-knowledge, to breaking through the shell that prevents us from seeing our full true nature. So shooting the self represents breaking out of our rigid thinking and habits to be liberated, whether, to some degree liberated, or this ultimate freedom called enlightenment. Let's say Buddha had that. And I believe many people have had that kind of wisdom. And I've known some of them. But at this point, due to this interaction, the hunter broke his bow and became a follower and a student of this teacher. So we all have this innate wisdom in us. In some cases, it's more covered over. Other cases, it's just below the surface. And it's hard to know where we are sometimes until the right person says the right thing to you, and you suddenly open your eyes. The sixth patriarch is one of the most famous figures in Zen. He was in China. Bodhidharma was the first. He brought Zen or Buddhism from India to China. Bodhidharma is a pretty famous name, but the sixth generation after him is called the sixth patriarch. Well, he was illiterate. He couldn't even read. But one day he was walking through a marketplace, and someone was reading from one of the books of wisdom of Buddhism, and he heard a couple of lines, and suddenly he woke up and he said, "This is where I need to be. I need to study this." And he asked this person, "Where did you get this text from?" And that sent him to the monastery where the fifth patriarch was leading. And eventually that sixth patriarch, even though he couldn't read or write, he had the wisdom, and eventually he met with the fifth patriarch, who helped him take the final step to his freedom. And then he became a very well-known teacher throughout China. So we don't have to have a lot of knowledge, but it could be imminent, just below the surface. Depends how, our history is in our own lives, or maybe in the past. This is actually another story. There was a Zen teacher who liked to challenge people. Not everyone is like this, but he would, if someone approached him, maybe to ask him a question, he'd pull a bow and arrow, as you can see here, and say, "What do you want?" So some people would run away, or, like he's aiming the arrow at their heart. Finally, somebody came along, I guess Yizang, and he said, "That arrow is for killing. Where's the arrow that gives life?" And then he became a student of that teacher. But that teacher was very happy to have someone approach him and say, "I don't care if you're shooting this arrow. That's not what this is all about. Where's the arrow for life?" I know this is a lot. Is this thought-provoking? Yes, good. I'm trying to slow myself down too, because in our Western way of living, we're always moving ahead, moving ahead. So I don't want to do that. Maybe I'll skip the story. So there's a lot to talk about, but freedom is freedom from, hold on a second, I'm missing something. Freedom from greed, anger, and ignorance is freedom. That means wherever you are, you're contented. You feel good. And also you're not likely to fight with other people. You find ways to collaborate or coexist peacefully. That's freedom, not freedom. Okay, I quit my job, I'm going to the mountains. I'm not going to talk to anyone again. That's very narrow freedom. The real freedom is when you can handle everything that life brings to you because your mind is free. One example I like to use is you're in a proverbial crowded movie theater and a fire starts. How do you react? Are you one of the people screaming and running and getting trampled or trampling people trying to get out? Or you help people find the exit? So that's detachment, that's freedom. When your mind is no longer captured by the circumstance, but you see what's really needed, that's freedom. That's detachment. Detachment is not the Western idea of being cold and aloof. It means not being swept away by the circumstances you're in. It's an important distinction. And another example I like to use is most children that I know of cry when they have a vaccination, young children. I did too when I was 5, 6, 7. And most adults, I'm not criticizing anyone here, but most adults, when you get a shot, you feel the same jab, but you don't cry about it. It doesn't seem like a big thing. What changed? It's the same stick in the arm. It's the same pain, but our mind is different. So through the Eightfold Path and through a good life, we can grow our ability to take stresses of life, which people call a stress, but it may no longer feel like a stress. And take all the things of life and respond without feeling them as unbearable pain. We can handle them much better. Just like outgrowing fear of the vaccination, that vaccination didn't change, but our response changed. But that takes some life experience. We get that experience going through life. We realize how to put things in context. It's the same thing. Through working on ourselves, we can grow our ability to handle stress. All right. I have quotes here. Buddha's last words. The first one here. Sometimes it's quoted just the last sentence, but I think it's important to say all component things in the world are impermanent. Everything that's born is also destroyed. That includes our body, includes the table I'm working at, the computer, we know about that. But everything that we deal with that's physical is also going to decay or disappear. So we can't be happy if we're attached on these things that have no permanence. Everything in our life is impermanent, but wisdom, even in Christianity, they say, put your treasures in heaven, not on the earth. The same idea. How do we gain our own salvation? It's finding that truth that is not born and destroyed. It's something deeper than that. So, in his compassion, he said, the last thing to focus on this, work hard to gain your own salvation, meaning freedom from suffering and ability to help other people. On the other hand, there's a Zen quote, if you meet Buddha on the road, kill him. What the heck is that? I see Stefan, everyone's smiling or like, yeah. It doesn't mean literally to kill him. However, if your mind is saying, oh, there's a wise person, watch out for that thought, because now you're attached. Free yourself, even from that. Then you can study with the person. If you meet a wise person, first free yourself and be yourself again. Trust yourself, but now I can study from a wise person because I have my own identity and I can relate and they can talk to me and I can talk to them. So kill the idea of Buddha, but follow wisdom. And if you meet a wonderful person, enjoy that relationship and that connection. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare anyone. And again, this line from Dogen, great enlightenment is the tea and rice of daily activity. Maybe sometimes we feel that when we prepare a meal for ourselves or for other people, and we enjoy that and we say, life is good. When you read about what's going on elsewhere, seems like we're pretty lucky. Another one of my suggestions is when you see the middle glass, just say it's half full and it's half empty. I'm not going to say it's half full. I'm not going to say it's half empty. It's both. That's reality. We don't have to create an artificial debate. Let's be real. Some suggestions that I put together, because we want this to be practical. Trying to communicate from the heart. Don't get overly busy. Try to simplify so you're not worn out. Of course, understand the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the Three Treasures. But in layman's terms, speak from the heart, be compassionate, don't be overly busy. Sometimes you have to be busy, that's okay. But if you're that way all the time, the question is, why am I doing this? Is this nervous activity that I keep taking on more and more? So something to consider. And some more. This is my own sort of a pet peeve, especially when people have their phone and they're sitting on the equipment that I want to use and they're taking 5 minutes to set up the playlist for the next set of songs. So, but I believe, like when I go to the gym, I leave my phone behind and I do the exercise. Take walks by yourself or with a companion. Try to be with people who make you feel healthy, make you feel good, and who encourage a good life. You can't always avoid the people who need from you, and it's good to help other people, but you have to make sure you're also getting support and happiness in your life. Be generous and do your obligations that you have at work or as a family member, and try to shape your life. This is an important one. Shape your life. I think that's in one of the original teachings, like a skilled, there was a word for it, person who makes wheels, like they bend the wood to the shape that they want. So we can bend our life into the shape that we want through our choices, moment by moment, day by day. Figure out how you want to live and gradually get to that way of living so that it supports the values that you care about. And that's sort of the reality of time. Time matters also. We live in the moment, but we also set a direction for ourselves. So both things are important. Oh, okay. We're at the end here. We can stay another 5 minutes if you can, all right? Maybe you can read these. The first one is Buddha's words also. So I'll leave that up here. And does anyone want to share any thoughts, feelings, reflection? What strikes you the most about what you might do in your life? Anything that caught your attention? I know things caught your attention. I'm not having doubts. I'm not worried, but maybe like what is primary, what really got your attention? I'm interested in that.
For me, it's just, I don't
Oh.
think it's anything necessarily new, but it just reminds me that Buddhism is just, it just makes so much sense. It makes so much sense for just a way to live your life in to help you learn to trust yourself.
Hmm.
But and which is something I struggle with, to trust your own self and to it's just a roadmap for living well, I think. And I'm just so thankful that I've found this. It's just it's just um the biggest thing for me, I think, is the not going into extremes, to find the middle. I think the middle way is what really speaks to me.
Sure. Okay. Well, thanks. I feel the same way. I feel thankful to have these teachings, and they are about real life. It's not a theoretical or mysterious teaching. It's very logical, and yet it's touches deep places, But yes, Steph and then M, okay?
Yeah, so I mean, gosh, there's so many things I think to say, but I think what really one of the things that stood out to me is just the compassion and authenticity of it, of the whole practice, because I mean, that really resonates with me personally. I think it's one thing that's standing out. And then I have a question to you, and you might have to answer this later. Like, what next? Like, will we have another meeting, or are you gonna give us some information to go investigate, or what will happen next?
I will send something to all of you. I mean, even those 2 books that I mentioned. But I would like to, I see there's some interest in meeting again. I actually did 2 other meetings on Buddhism, one on karma and another one about some famous sayings in Zen and Buddhism and what they mean. So I might repeat those. None of you did those, right? Because I think this is your first time. Lisa, maybe you did something, but I think I'll redo those because like karma, we didn't talk at all about that, and maybe that's worth understanding more what that is, because there's good karma, bad karma, and non-producing karma, which has to do with how do you free yourself from all of those. Good karma means, maybe more money or a happy life, but how do you free yourself from all the expectations or the traps that catch our mind? I need to be happy and comfortable all the time. How do I get that? Through my good karma. But there's something more to it than that. Anyway, yeah, I'll announce that. Maybe I'll schedule those in the next few days and announce them, okay? Does that sound like a good thing? Okay, good. And Em, what would you like to say?
Was it, I think was it Jocelyn? No, Jocelyn then spoke first.
Yes, or
Um,
Susan. Was it Susan, I think? Yeah.
Susan. I had something else I wanted to say, but I wanted to kind of bounce off of that idea of walking the middle path. I am in a intensive therapy program called DBT. It is, for those who are unfamiliar, it stands for dialectical behavioral therapy. And a big tenet of learning to change certain thoughts in order to change the way that we behave is to practice walking the middle path, dialectics. So a lot of people tend to be in black or white and have a hard time being right down the middle. There is a skill set called checking facts, and in doing so, we learn to kind of see the world for what it is and not what we want it to be. Consciously or unconsciously, I suppose, just through perception and through opinions. We, just stick to true facts. And I think that that's something that's been really beneficial for me in my healing journey. Yeah. And to kind of conclude the session, I guess the very last quote really kind of stuck out to me of the bee gathering nectar does not harm or disturb the color and fragrance of the flower. It's something I really want to focus on in life is harm reduction, and it is a very difficult path to walk. Or I suppose knowing that you have moved in ways that have hurt other people, even if you didn't intend to do so. It's very hard to I guess, find ways to redeem oneself for that, even in just moving throughout the world with yourself.
Let me say about that, there's regret and mourning, M-O-U-R, and for things that we've done when we realize that we missed an opportunity to do something good, or we did something that caused some pain. That's going to be natural. So there's no avoiding that. But if we start getting better at avoiding those actions, we can recover and start to, live better. Because you said that you're not sure how to make up for those actions. The only thing you can do is to process them and go through the awareness yourself and the realization, which can be uncomfortable, but it's a purifying process that frees you from that past error, and you try not to do those things again in the future. I'll end with a very good quote that is actually closely related to what you brought up, Em. This is when asked, can you sum up Buddhism in one sentence? Buddha said, do as much good as possible, avoid doing harm, and purify the mind. Now, okay, the first two are clear, but what I find very important here is purify the mind. Until we can see clearly, we're going to inevitably do some harm and we won't be able to do all the good we could because we won't see clearly. Purifying the mind is not a moralistic purity. It's about seeing clearly when we're no longer caught in our own needs and even the regrets. When we're free of all those things and we can see clearly, then our mind is purified and we can do as much good as possible and avoid doing harm. So that purifying the mind is part of that. So do good, avoid doing harm, and purify the mind through all these practices. All right.
So,
yeah, go ahead. One last thing.
So sorry. So I was just curious, the purifying of the mind, would that be going hand in hand with like focus and clarity, or would that be more something that you'd be doing like shadow work, I suppose?
Well, the Eightfold Path in terms of Buddhism, but try to be nice to other people, make them happy, but also be equally nice to yourself. Like know your own limits, so you take care of yourself. be helpful and give yourself some time to reflect without distractions. All those things that make sense, we just have to do them sometimes. And over time, we start to feel different, and people give you feedback too, that you're such a nice person, or, oh, you're so calm. So that's, that's the result, not your intention, but it's a result of focusing on those things. Does that help? All right, good. Thank you all. So look for emails about what will come up, and I'll be doing more of these. Thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Lisa. See you. See you all. Be well.